got a crazy ass true story to tell. It could be funny or thrilling or creepy as hell. And when you speak, surely none will make a sound. And the world's going breathless when your true story comes around.
Welcome back to the Your Best True Story podcast, everyone, episode 15. If it's your first time listening to the show, Your Best True Story tries to share as many of the world's craziest, creepiest, funniest, most ridiculous true stories that we can, and we definitely encourage you to send us your craziest true story. You can do that over the yourbesttruestory.com website, and every month the audience votes on which story they thought was the most interesting, and if you win for that month, you not only win $250, but you get invited on the show to be interviewed in a one-on-one episode to hear more about your interesting stories in life. And today's episode is one of those interview episodes from the May winner. And his name is Rob Lewczyk. And he is going to be a very interesting interview because he's actually got his own similar podcast to this one. It's called Your Most Interesting Story. And I highly recommend you check that out because it's a little bit different of a format, but he's got some very interesting interviews on there with people telling real life entertaining stories. So if you like this show, you're probably going to like Rob's as well. And Rob was kind enough to call in his own personal true story last month and actually won the vote for it. So we were able to pay Rob the prize money, and he was gracious enough to come on and let us talk to him one-on-one for a little bit. If you are more into the regular episodes where we play the actual calls from the audience calling in their true stories, the next episode will be back to those calls. We just have the interview episodes once a month with the story winner. So next episode, we'll be back to hearing multiple calls. And if you do like the show, if you could, please leave a 5-star rating on whatever podcast app you use. It really helps us out. And also, please tell somebody else about the show, especially if they've got a great true story that they could call in, whether it's funny, scary, paranormal. I'm always looking to hear more creepy, crazy, paranormal stories because those are so entertaining. So please don't hold back and keep on sending them in, and we'll get them on the show and give you a chance to potentially win some money. Now, without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get to our interview with Rob Lewczyk, who is the podcast host of Your Most Interesting Story. And here we go. May's story vote winner, Rob Lewczyk. And Rob, we are excited to have you on the show. And thank you very much for coming on to speak with us and talk about your own podcast. And I'm trying to start these interviews with the first question just of the $250 prize money. Have you spent it on anything exciting?
I have not, but I've got plans. I think I'm going to reinvest it in my pod. So I started investigating exactly how that's done.
Yeah.
So if you have any tips, I'm all ears.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, I listened to your most recent episode on the guy that was the illegal cannabis farmer in California.
Yes.
And after he, towards the end of that episode, was talking about when he briefly became a cocaine dealer, I was like, that would be a good story if Rob uses the $250 to launch his cocaine dealership empire.
I got my idea from my podcast.
Yeah. But podcast advertising is fine too.
Yeah, but I'd rather not have a shotgun put in my mouth to have me lose the money. So people have to listen to the episode to hear how that turns out. But probably not the best business investment, I would think, right now.
Yeah. And before
I learned a lot of good drug terminology from that episode, so I know a lot more now than I did before. So I feel more knowledgeable.
Awesome. Yeah. I've never been much of a marijuana guy, so I certainly learned a ton just to kind of get inside and understand what was going on back in the 80s in Northern California.
And that's one thing that Freddie and I were actually talking about. Your podcast does really well, where first of all, let's just explain the way we first started talking to each other is we basically came up with very similar ideas for podcasts at almost the exact same time, completely independent of each other. As I was getting your best true story off the ground, you were starting a podcast called Your Most Interesting Story, and very similar concepts. They're a little bit different in structure and format. I'd say yours is leaning more towards the deep dive NPR version of going into an individual stories, and mine and Freddie's is kind of like the morning radio show from the 90s, where we're just winging it, and you get multiple stories in an episode. So, how did that come about? You coming up with that idea and starting the podcast?
Yeah, excellent question, obviously. An excellent idea, by the way. I totally agree with the approach, but you're right. It was, and I'd love to hear your origin story at some point as well, but I had always had an itch to do something around podcasting. And as we know, they tend to say, hey, you've got to specialize. You got to have a topic to dive deep into. I don't know much about anything. Honestly, most of the stuff I know about is work related. And I wasn't going to work all day and then come start talking about that on my side hobby. So I had the idea that, hey, everyone's probably got a good story somewhere in their life. And if I could find a way to sort of put together a well-produced, entertaining, compelling way to just get that across, I think it'd be a lot of fun to do. It could be really interesting. And I think the folks that have their stories told could really enjoy that as well.
Yep. Yeah, it's really good. I mean, so far, I think you've got like 7 or 8 episodes out. But
That's right.
I love not only the production quality and, like Freddie was mentioning, your kind of the format is you interview somebody with a really interesting life story, and then you segue into that to kind of give deep dive snippets of information to give more context, either the time, the place, or the subject that the guy's talking about. Like Freddie is like saying, thank God I know cocaine terminology now from your last episode. And some of the episodes that you've got are like fascinating stuff, not only the cannabis grower, but then one of my favorites was the guy that went to work in Russia in the 90s after the fall of the Berlin Wall, which I just find that completely fascinating. His, that entire him experiencing that for the first time. And have you got a favorite episode so far?
I tend to think which one I'm working on becomes my favorite at that time. And it's honest because it's, I'm learning new stuff. I'm connecting with that guest at that time. We spend the interview and then some back and forth afterwards to clear up some details. And they're usually really appreciative when they finally hear the final cut. So, I know it sounds kind of lame, but whatever I happen to be working on at that time, I feel like I've made it a little bit better than the previous one. And that story's my favorite, but I think they all have some really interesting twists to them. And some are more like this guy was almost killed, like really over the top, and some are a little more subtle, but they all have something special about them that I think really makes them a little bit compelling. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, it's definitely good work. And hopefully the thing, my experience with doing the interview-based podcasts, though, is people don't get how difficult that is to actually find the people to interview, because I imagine in your case, you're having to vet people for having interesting stories, being willing to come on and share their story, and just the aspect of searching. And probably like when I've tried to schedule interviews before on my prior podcast, I would ask probably 20 different people for interviews to get one. So I can imagine it's got to be a lot of work, I would think.
It has. And I've been mercilessly bugging family, friends, professional network, just trying to get folks to come on. I'm like, come on, everyone's got a good story here. That's the premise. So just come on and do it. So we're getting to a point now where I think there's enough momentum where I'm actually, for the first time, have a bit of a pipeline of guests that are lined up. So
nice.
It's, I'm stretching into the fall now, which over time the theory is I'll have more to choose from, be more selective, and pick the most compelling stories. So, knock on wood, I'm past some of the difficult startup points. But just to go back, Jim, real fast with you and Freddie. Originally, when I started this up, I had a past work colleague who had actually just left his job, and I said, "Hey, are you interested in doing this? Because I have the same idea." In some ways of just, let's interact with this person. This is my scenario. I'm at a party. We're hanging out with someone. They start telling a story. We start riffing with them. And isn't it just hilarious? The problem is I'm not that funny in the moment like you guys are. I heard back the first attempt of that. I'm like, dude, this is not going to work. So I had to say, hey, maybe I'll lean into production. What about some more of an NPR type approach to this where I can kind of bring to bear what I'm good at, which is not off the cuff humor like you guys are really good at doing.
Well, thank you for that. I'm not sure if everyone would agree with that. Yeah, the off the cuff strategy developed from which I wouldn't say that this other podcast is completely dead, but I used to have a more serious podcast, interview based, called The Independent Riot, that was more like trying to get independent thinkers, both politically, but in interesting fields. And I would have those in-depth discussions with them. And then the follow-up episode would be me and Freddie just kind of shooting the shit, talking about the interview.
I gotcha.
And then just sheer laziness, I think we shifted to this. We were just like, well, let's take out the hard work. I'm tired of reading people's books and trying to sound intelligent. And let's just go for the shooting the shit. And so it's at least it's more fun, probably. It's definitely less work.
Well, and I mean, truth be told, you've come clean on that. But honestly, I said, hey, I don't want to spend a lot of research on these topics, quite honestly. So who knows more about their own lives than the people I'm talking to? So if they become the quote unquote expert for the show, and then I fill in the gaps with that little post-production stuff, what you just talked about, like, hey, I didn't quite get what this meant. Let me do a deeper dive and sort of explain that to the listener so they can follow it as well. Yeah. Trying to listen like with ears from someone who may not have any knowledge, which is usually my situation, quite honestly. So if I don't think to ask it in time, I'll just follow up later. I'll do a little bit Google searching and figure out the way to sort of plug that gap with a brief cutaway to say, hey, did you know this is what this term means when it comes to cocaine, right?
Yeah. And most of these guests so far, you're just going out and kind of like one-on-one asking people to tell you if they know somebody that has a good story. You're not doing like any real internet marketing trying to get them. It's all boots on the ground.
It is boots on the ground, go onto LinkedIn, go into Facebook, sending direct emails to people that I may have had contact with before. There's some, or friends of friends, right? That's been the Reefer Ridge episode, the one that you referenced earlier, is an acquaintance of the guy from Russia, right? So he says, hey, I know somebody whose wife has an acting class with this guy. It's like, this guy's always telling fantastic stories. You need to talk to Jonathan. I'm like, send him my way. Let's get this guy locked down. And he was in fact, he's got tons of good stories. And I've already tried to send them to your guys' way, because this guy's really good at telling stories, as you may have heard. But, he almost couldn't stop telling us another story as we wrapped up the first one, because he only covered the first year of 10 years doing that. Wow. So he's theoretically got 9 more years to go and stories on top of that. So,
yeah, if he is listening now, he should call in. Any stories about legal drug dealing or, he was very entertaining. That actually, I don't know if this is the same area. I'm sort of familiar with parts of Northern California, but not totally. But that Humboldt County area that's pretty notorious, or used to be, for growing cannabis back in the 80s and 90s and everything. Yep. Is that the same area where there was I think there was a Netflix special about there's a lore of a Bigfoot killing a man or a group of migrants on a cannabis farm?
That's
Is that the same area?
I believe it is. Yeah, I'm a little bit south of that. I am in California, but I'm a few hours south of that area. But yeah, in the Emerald Triangle. But I saw that same show as well, Jim. I remember seeing that where that was. They're not sure if it was an actual Bigfoot or if it's just people passing that information around to cover up some other nefarious things that are going on.
I think it's a low probability it's an actual Bigfoot, but I'm keeping my fingers crossed.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, so what have you got any? Can you tell us about any sort of give us a glimpse of upcoming guests you might have?
I do, yeah. And speaking of people knowing people, so we had an episode about a gentleman and his wife that live in a house that they believe to be haunted by their past pets. So that was episode 6. We are not alone. But it turns out that, because I'll tell you, I hit all the networks I can. His mom, who gave me a little bit of a blurb for that episode, I said, hey, if you ever want to come on the show and tell your story, she's like, you know what? I've got a story. And I don't believe that her kids even know the story yet. So the first time that her kids hear this most interesting story that she's never shared with anyone but her husband and her husband's sister, they're going to hear it for the first time through your most interesting story. So that's pretty cool. But that'll be the July episode coming up the first week of July.
Nice. I haven't listened to that one. I know the one that you are referencing, but haven't actually listened to that one. It sounds pretty interesting. So
yeah, I remember one of your earlier shows you were asking, how can we never hear stories about animal ghosts? Well, this one's got it. So if you get a chance,
nice.
Yeah, you can hear all about animal ghosts.
Yeah, there's got to be a way to somehow where. Oh, go ahead, Freddie.
No, I did. I listened to it, and it does touch in there on the animal aspect, which I thought was great because you don't hear that at all. And there's a little funny interaction with some dogs and some cats and orbs, and it's a good one. It's a good episode.
Yeah, thanks. It was a blast. They actually had to wrap that one up because something was going on in his house, and he says, "I got to go," because he was hearing a bunch of commotion downstairs.
Oh man! If you could have got that,
there's a guy.
Should have followed him downstairs.
I told them to bring a camera, right? But I'm half a country away, so I wasn't able to go there with him.
Oh yeah.
So we kind of jumped into talking just about the show right out of the gate, but what is, like, if you don't mind, kind of giving, I know you've done a lot of interesting stuff from not only podcasting that you're getting into now, but you were into music for a while. And then you mind giving us kind of like the brief Rob overview of what's been going on?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's the guy who's semi-creative but not good enough to ever really make a go of it. So a lot of creative hobbies. Just what is it? The jack of all trades, master of none. Yeah. So no, but I had about before my kid was born, 20 plus years ago, I decided that songwriting was my deal and I was going to write a hit song. The problem is the more I tried to write a hit song, the less I enjoyed the process. So I said, okay, screw that. I'm not going to try that anymore. Kid gets born, put it aside for a while. I came back to it. It's the same group of folks, great folks. We're on these music boards. We all write songs. We all post them. We all talk to each other about them. But at some point, it's like, you know what? What's the point of this? I kept asking that question. Why another song, right? It seems kind of silly. No one cares but me. I couldn't get my wife to listen to them. I'm like, come on, listen. She's like, oh, I'm kind of busy right now. So it was really just me doing this for myself. And I thought, what else might be out there that could potentially give me that creative outlet? That's fun. That's I could sort of, and this is where you get back to the point where the time I spend in production to put these together. Putting a song together is very similar to putting together a podcast, right? Because it's got all these different tracks and you got to layer stuff in. So some of the skills I learned from working with my, kind of writing and creating songs, I put into sort of putting the podcast together as well. But so this is an idea I had toward the end of last year. I mentioned that my co-host Jake had left his current role at work. I had this vague concept of that, everyone's most interesting story. I had this grand plan that we'd be hilarious together off the cuff on the air. Not really the case. He's really good. He's like a sniper. He sits in the background and he'll add things once in a while. I'm too busy trying to keep the camera straight and make sure that I'm talking slow enough where people can understand me. Making sure the guest feels comfortable and whatnot. So, but yeah, that's sort of how it transitioned. And I'd like to think that I'm continuing to learn. It's a blast, right? As you know, it's a hobby for the most part, except for the few people that are fortunate enough to really make a go of it. So, but I'm not going anywhere. I got nothing but Rob's hour at the end of the day to spend on something, might as well spend it on podcasting.
Yeah.
Right?
I can definitely empathize with your journey. I originally, when I was younger in my 20s, and this is before all of it everybody became a writer with self-publishing on Amazon. My passion was I was going to be a novelist and a writer. And I spent years doing that and made a little bit of headway with it. But eventually, it sounds like the very similar thing. I started loathing the process of it.
Exactly.
And then when you start to, it's cool when you're really young. But then as you start to grow older and see you're devoting all this time for something that very few people appreciate. And it's just hard to keep that passion up. It's because people don't get unless they try to do how much work and effort goes into even stuff that they don't consider good in result. It's still incredibly taxing. So maybe
even
that's
if
what
you're good. I'm sorry. It's even if you're good, it's still a lightning strike to actually have any kind of success.
Because it's all marketing based and it's
and
still
who
an
you know,
industry.
of course, welcome to the real world, right? But who you know is important as well.
Yeah, so it's grueling. I give a tip of the hat to anyone that sticks with it for a lifetime, any artistic endeavor like that. Of 100%. Course, now with AI, we're all going to be replaced on all of those levels anyway. So
well, I'm in communications in my full-time job too. So podcasting may become full-time pretty soon if they figure out a way to have AI replace what I do. So
it's that's one of my recently because I'm getting fascinated by the stuff you can do with it already, and I just don't think that really the average person out there realizes how powerful the tools are and are prepared at all for potentially the changes that are coming, because there's a lot of creative endeavors, but even less than, I'm sure the people at the top of any industry are going to be okay, but if your job does not require some pretty special talents unique to you, I think we're all looking at a very different future coming up.
Yeah, and we're getting quite tangential, but I think a lot about this as well. It's the progress in AI is now being fueled by commerce, right? And now you've got business trying to drive it forward so they can all make money, and that's just going to add a rocket ship to everything. So I'll be really curious. And there's this, what's that called? I forget the actual term for it, but the folks in the tech industry, they talk to folks who are working in AI, and they all have some sort of percentage on what they think the likelihood of AI actually ending the human race is. And it can range anywhere from the doom of something, I don't know, but it's from 0.5%. Some folks think it's as much as 20%, but yet they're still working in the industry. They're still doing what they do. It's just, okay.
Well, it's weird because I'm kind of I'm definitely, I would say, independent thinker, so I tend to be anti-control, anti-establishment, anti-government, anti-business telling me whatever to do. And so I can't game out any scenario where things look good to me, because it doesn't matter who controls it.
That's right.
It's just as things shift, and even if it's not a doomsday Terminator scenario with robots trying to kill us, it could just get real awful between now and whenever that happens in the future. So
that's my projected future. I'll be out in my front yard pulling a weed, and I'm going to be zapped by some robot, overlord coming down the street. It's just going to happen with 4 years. But let's enjoy our time in the meantime, right?
That could be a great way to go.
It could be, yeah. It would have made a hell of a story if I'd survive it, right?
Yeah.
I'll call that one in if I survive the attack.
Freddie tends to try and be more optimistic about AI. Have you, what do you call it? Benevolent overlord AI, Freddie? He's just hoping once it takes over, it's nice.
We're totally headed for a benevolent AI. And then also as a side gig, I'm going to be launching a 6-toed AI OnlyFans feet pic site. So I'm good.
That's got to already exist. Does that not?
Probably not, but if I need to go to 7 toes, I'll do it.
That's awesome.
Do you really need AI for that? There's got to be seven-toed women out there.
Not enough. I could probably a month or two's worth of content, but AI will take care of it.
Well, I've been finding early when you do the imagery with AI, sometimes it puts extra digits on, so it must already kind of be it's warming up for your idea there, Freddie.
Yeah, that's where I got the idea anyway. But I don't think anybody's done it. But after this episode, it'll already be. We'll cross that off the list.
That's out. Yeah, the idea's out.
Freddie, we should start. I might sell fake ad spots for seven-toed AI OnlyFans. Just to interlude into the podcast. See if we can get anybody to sign up. See if we can get anybody to commit before we go through the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah, the gawkers will be there, Jim. Yeah. Why would you go 5? Why would you go 5 when you can go 7?
Yeah. Makes total
sense.
More
is better, right?
Yeah.
More is better.
Same price, more toes. So, Rob, we even forgot to mention about your story that actually won from May was about you confronting a bike thief. And that's a great story. I do not actually remember. I think it's like 2 or 3 episodes back. So people should go and definitely check out that episode if they want to hear your story. And we've got a link to you doing it, the Ring video video of you confronting the bike thief. But I know you mentioned when you called it in that you didn't have a lot of, that's not like a hobby for you. You aren't like Northern California's most notorious bike thief vigilante or anything.
I'm not. Yeah. I don't patrol the neighborhood looking for potential thieves. No, I'm probably the least likely to anticipate that I would ever confront a thief, but it just sort of happened.
Yeah. Well, you did a good job. Yeah.
I was, I went back and after kind of going through the story and I watched the video and I was surprised at the violence with which I came out of the house, like a rocket. It was, I impressed myself. I'm like, whoa, I don't remember doing that. But yeah, it was pretty stupid retrospectively, but hey, if you're going to do something stupid, you might as well look, I don't know, at least like you did it with gusto.
Yeah. That's a good rule to live by with everything. It is amazing. I think Freddie and I, when we were talking about your call, maybe that was one where we mentioned that we were talking about like stories of like there's plenty of stories of people like in car wrecks in different scenarios where they actually will have like such an adrenaline rush or change of things that they've actually like lifted cars off of people and done pretty almost like in a blacked out state where they don't remember it. But it's pretty fascinating how your instincts will take the scenario into account and act it out for you to protect you in those kind of scenarios.
I'm a classic overthinker. Yeah, Freddie.
Before did time slow down or did it speed up for you during that episode?
Yeah, I would say in my mind, it just got simple. Like I said, I'm kind of a chronic overthinker before I act, before I speak in many instances. In that time frame, I'm seeing this is my next action. It wasn't pre-thought. It's just these are the things. I don't know if I went back to some sort of base nature of, the caveman protecting his cave because somebody was stealing his wheel or whatever he's got in his cave. But before I know it, it's just sort of retrospectively, just the adrenaline rush was just sort of, I'm like, what did I just do? Why did I do that? Right. But the thoughts didn't come.
In the moment, were you like hyper focused where you had time in your head to lay out the whole plan? You saw where the guy was, all the utensils you could use around you, like I feel like maybe that's where you were sort of slowed down and just making your way like a chess game. And then after the fact,
in some ways, it was more of I'm trying to think of the right way to express this. It just became a much more base reaction without thought. It's like, this is happening and now I'm doing this because I process there's someone in my house trying to take something that I don't want them to take. I need to take action right now. If I had thought about the repercussions. So I don't I mean, I had my phone in my hand after the guy left. I saw it on the video. I'm still holding my iPhone in my hand. Like, I had this the entire time. Like, that would have been something to probably toss on the ground or leave in the room where I actually saw the guy on the security camera as a starting point. But yeah, I would say if nothing else, it made it really easy in that moment for me to decide what the next course of action was. Otherwise, I'd probably be debating like, well, I could go out there, but if I went out there, then this might happen. And there was just none of that. It was kind of nice in that way.
It's interesting because I think there's a lot of not only stressful events like that, but that kind of where your frontal lobe or whatever, your executive function thinking shuts down and you act more instinctively. That happens a lot in sports, I know. And from like, I used to play basketball all the time growing up, and so much that like you would actually get into a state of flow where it was like almost like a Zen meditative thing where you were reacting completely naturally, but there was no conscious kind of analysis. The inner dialogue shut off. And I've heard some people argue that that's the natural, that you should be in that state all the time, basically, if you were living a perfectly correct and aligned life. But yeah, and so it might take some extraordinary event, though, to shock most of us to get us into that a lot of the time. To turn off the chatter.
The adrenaline just flushed out that portion of the brain, as you said. But the way you described the Jim is how I experienced it, right? Like there was just not a lot of thought, just action. And it was not premeditated. It was not determined. It was just, this is what's happening in the moment. And it was a split second. Here's what's happening next, apparently. Yeah. As I went back and looked at it.
And you didn't get addicted to the rush where now you wander the streets looking for people stealing bikes.
The neighborhood vigilante. Yeah. No, I do that.
Nice. Well, yeah, that's Freddie. Have you got any questions for Rob on any of the stories of his that you listened to, or?
No, I wanted to know. I really was interested
Freddie,
in
the reason why I like to prompt Freddie is he'll come up with something very interesting to ask you if you give him a second.
No, I have had circumstances where, for myself, that I experience the same outcome as Rob does, where you're sort of just an observer to you acting. And in my occurrence, it was the frame rate of time sort of slowed down. And I've heard versions of this where your brain actually knows you're in a stress situation and takes in more information than it normally does. Like your focus widens and you're able to literally, like if you stopped and did a 360 around and got all of the cues and points and stuff, like that happens in your brain where it directs all of the energy towards what's happening in this moment. Like you're literally in the present, like that moment. There's no other thoughts going anywhere, other directions. And then you're like you said, you're a passenger in your own vessel, acting out Superman stuff like you did.
I think that's really, I mean, if you think about it, if I picture in my mind the distance it took to get from where I was sleeping out the front door into the driveway, I have a clearer picture of that happening, like each step of that process, that I do on typical things when I think back up. Like I can remember what if I were to say, what path did I take when I went from one part of my house to the other just yesterday, I would have no clue. But that instance, to your point, sort of the heightened awareness, sort of being pulled along by the next, like you said, I'm more of a viewer of what I am doing right now than the person making the decision of what I'm doing. I think I must have captured a lot more of that information in detail, because I literally, as I'm talking to you, can picture almost every element from that particular instance up until when the guy was actually gone.
Yeah, you almost have like a backseat driver kind of view where you're like, this is crazy what's happening. That you have another inner dialogue through yourself going, you're eating popcorn and watching, like, I can't believe I'm about to go do this. Like, and you're talking to yourself in your head as you're doing, or as your body is doing these things, and you're just along for the ride. It's crazy.
Yep.
And this is why I like to get in Freddie's brain, because we'll quickly get into conversations of so who is observing and who's doing the thinking, and are we even here, Rob? That's
right.
That's what Freddie wants to know at the bottom of all of the questions.
Yeah, that's honestly a big draw for your folks' banter as well. It's just as you go back and forth and puzzle this stuff out, there are thoughts that have bounced in my head often as well, because it's just I want to process the details and try to figure it out if we're even capable of figuring it out, right? Which I have some doubts that we, as in whatever form we are, whoever we are, could ever figure it out, because I think it's so much bigger than our own brains and minds could process. That's
kind of my assumption to the whole thing, is that part of the game is you can't figure it out. Like, that's part of the rules of the game. And if you could figure it out, then you would be from a perspective that is different from this. So it's like you can't play Monopoly with, unless you play by the rules that are Monopoly. So you can't break out of the game, basically.
So is the question then, Freddie, that in an instance that you were just describing, are you deeper in the game, or have you actually stepped back from the game in those moments?
That's a good question.
I think you have a clearer view of your actual role in the game. I think you're given a little pinhole to the truth that you are actually just observing the character of your vessel walking through your own movie. That's what I think.
Your higher self steps out of there. I'm going to get out of here for a little bit. This is going to get dicey.
Oh, let's see what he does. He's really, like it's the Duke who has it. They stop in the middle of the air and you're like, oh, how'd they get into this situation? What's he going to do to get out of there? And let's find out. Yep. So yeah, I think you get a little bit more clarity in moments like that.
Yeah, I buy it.
Nice. Well, Rob, that makes me think I've got a question for you about our show now. Have any of the calls or guests that we've had on stuck out to you as being interesting? Or
the one that these are the things where I don't want to think too hard. There is a woman who called in who is somehow being surveilled, even though she was not around technology.
Yes.
It's like she went out and bought a sandwich at a local Walmart, ate it in her car, and she was getting those creepy calls at some time, either once a week. It was telling her exactly what she ate and at what time.
That sounded like a little girl. Yep.
Exactly. Yeah. That was. I don't know how to fit that data into my broader scope of what the hell's going on. So I just okay, I'll put that one off to the side. I won't think about that one.
Rob, if you want a little more in depth into the craziness of that phone call, look up a woman called Sabrina Wallace. Just Google her and watch a video or two of her, and it is like that call but times 100. And I don't know definitely. If she's crazy or like Mensa level smart, but her banter is otherworldly. Like, wow. I don't know where to put it. You can email Jim and tell him after if you ever watch one of those.
I will. I'm looking forward to watching.
There's actually, and I've had an idea of occasionally pulling some of the interviews I did for the Independent Riot, the better storytellers, like chopping up some of it and posting it on your Best True Story. One of the people I interviewed, which I would recommend anybody if you'd like true stories, and Rob, you might want to check this out so you can search the guy out and have him on your show maybe. His name's Robert Guffey. He's a professor in, I think, Berkeley or somewhere in California. He's a professor that has the title of the episode that I interviewed him was The Craziest True Story You'll Ever Hear. And he wrote a book about a buddy of his named Damien that, and this is all a true story, that was stalked by people. They never truly knew what happened. But basically, Robert Guffey and I think other people, they kind of leaned towards that this guy Damien was the target of military and industrial contractors that were doing like a psyop, like, which has apparently been sort of a la MK Ultra known to happen, where they'll pick people that don't have a lot of recourse financially or legally, like people that are destitute, or this guy was addicted to heroin, I think. So he wasn't in a prime position to fight back. But the story of what happened to him and all the crazy stuff is just nuts. And I think the book that he wrote is called Cameleo, maybe. But fascinating interview. But it just like kind of along that lines of that there's the scariest thing might not be paranormal stuff. It's the people that have access to technologies and power that we don't know we're not aware of yet. And them messing with people, basically.
Potentially our tax dollars at work, right?
Yeah. And it was, this guy experienced all kinds of crazy stuff. Like, it sounded, and this was even, I think this occurred in the early 2000s. And some of the tech, I think, has been proven to exist now. But it sounded like there was somebody coming into his apartment at night, like, basically invisible, like somehow shielding his presence from him to mess with him, gang stalking, leaving crazy voicemails, just trying to see how far they could push him. And it's a crazy story.
Wow. Yeah, I'll definitely check that out.
Yeah, so it's good to not get on those people's lists. Whoever those people are, I'd just like to say we don't want to be on your list. We respect you. We respect your work.
Exactly.
Please don't target us.
And then this happened to make me think. You asked about things that stuck in my mind from past stories. I knew I was up against the mushroom monk, and I thought that was going to be a hard one. I'm surprised that I'm here talking to you, because I thought for sure that gentleman was going to win based on his story. So
that was a great story, and I thought that would have won. But like, there's what I've noticed is it's a small enough pool of people right now that are voting that it definitely matters if somebody kind of puts out the word and says, "Hey, vote for me." Because then otherwise, if people don't do that, like, it's just, they'll get a couple of votes, but it really seems to be people that like kind of push the envelope a little bit, or at least draw attention to it to get people to vote for them. Hopefully, eventually there'll be enough stories coming in, enough people voting that it won't be able to be swayed easily. But
right.
Heck, yeah, I don't know. They're all good stories, so.
Yeah, my apologies to the mushroom monk. I think you should have won. Although I still voted for myself, so sorry.
Yeah. Well, yeah, believe it or not, the second place right behind you, I think you only beat her by one vote, was actually the woman Barbara that called in her story about finding a snake and throwing it out of her meditation hut.
Yep. I remember that one. Threw the blanket over it and threw it out of the hut.
Yep. So... But, I thought that Mushroom Monk was a winner as well, but he is, his fan base is MIA at this
He's a
point.
winner in my book, at least, if no one else is.
Well, all right, we are getting close to the 45-minute point, I believe. Freddie, have you got any additional questions for Rob? Like, if Rob can prove that he is real? Or what the nature of time is? Anything?
All right. Well, I'll give you a timely one. Do you have any thoughts on the Leviathan? The
Leviathan?
Yes, the Leviathan.
Like the water creature?
Yes.
Mm-mm. No, I'm sorry. I'm not aware of that.
It might be a little too timely. It's just popped up in the last couple of days, so maybe next time.
Isn't that a biblical, like, water monster?
Biblical, giant, like 300-mile long water creature, which has been popping up this week in social media, and people trying to find it on the planet, and some think they have.
Nice.
Interestingly
enough, but yeah.
Is this that giant undersea organism that you're talking about? Like some huge, or is it an actual animal?
It's it depends on which version of it they're explaining, but they're literally using Google Earth to map out its head and saying it has moved. But it's supposedly an interdimensional creature. So weirdly enough, it moves very slowly, but it's the size of what they're talking about. I can't even wrap my head around. But it has permeated some of the social media talking points this week. So you'll probably hear about it now that your phone has heard me talk about it.
I'm a little bit... It's going to show up on my Google ads, yeah.
Yeah.
I think this is a good new tradition to the show, Freddie, where we just end with some real bizarre cliffhanger from you that we never address again. Like one of the shows we just ended with Freddie announcing that he didn't think space was real, and then we just ended the show and never talked about it again.
Something to think about till next time.
Yeah.
Well,
all right, Rob. Well, would you like to... What's that?
That was your fault for having me ask the last question.
Yeah.
You'll learn.
Well, Rob, would you like to let anybody listening know how to find you and your show and any social media and things?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for the opportunity. So you can search for your most interesting story on any of the podcast platforms. It's also YMIS for your most interesting story. So YMIS podcast on Instagram. That's the only social that I do right now. And also I have that handle on YouTube as well, where we do a slightly video version of the pod where I throw up some AI generated, for the most part, imagery that goes along with the story. So if you're more of a visual person, you might want to check out the YouTube versions.
Nice. Well, thank you very much, Rob. We love your show. Appreciate your support and calling into ours, and hopefully we'll be doing more stuff together in the near future, because you've got a great show, and it sort of classes up mine and Freddie's act a little.
I feel the same way about yours. I look forward to it. I keep on refreshing to say, is the new one out yet? So you guys do an awesome job. I'm impressed. And yeah, hopefully we have a chance to continue to work together down the road. It was really nice meeting you both.
Nice. Thank you, Rob.
All right. Take care.
You got a crazy ass true story to tell. It could be funny or thrilling or creepy as hell. And when you speak, surely none will make a sound. And the world's going breathless when your true story comes around. Oh, hear the crazy bullshit flying. Just one more maybe true story before we're dying. Yet be warned, surely not all stories will be treated the same. So don't blame us if your tale about grandma's cookies is lame. The only way to ensure you could possibly win a buck is to make sure that story of yours don't suck. So instead of yawns, go ahead and tell us how that Bigfoot or werewolf drowned, and then hear the world go breathless when your true story comes around. You'll hear the crazy